Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight in today with, well, a pretty shocking statistic: 19 people killed in protests, and the trigger, a government action banning dozens of popular social media sites.
It sounds almost unbelievable when you put it like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A technical regulation leading to that level of violence.
Exactly. So if you're here hoping to quickly get your head around what happened in Nepal recently, the protests, the government ban, you're absolutely in the right place. Our mission today is to really unpack this. We need to look at the immediate cause, that big social media shutdown, but also, crucially, the deeper stuff.
Right, those underlying frustrations. We're talking about widespread anger over the alleged corruption issues of governance. That's really the second track here.
So two threads. First, the direct reaction to the digital ban itself, the shock, the anger about losing access.
And second, this pre-existing simmering discontent about corruption and, well, what many sees as growing authoritarianism. The ban basically just lit the fuse on something that was already there.
Okay, let's start with that trigger then, the digital shutdown, because the scale of it was, frankly, enormous.
It really was.
The sources we've looked at detail a government order hitting 26 major social media and messaging platforms.
Yeah, and not obscure ones. We're talking the big names: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, X, even LinkedIn, Pinterest, Reddit, Signal, all just switched off.
Taken offline inside the country. So what was the official reason? How did the government justify this?
Officially, it was presented as a straightforward regulatory issue. The Ministry of Communications said these platforms miss a deadline.
A deadline for what?
For registration under new regulations. These regs apparently came from a court order. So the government line was simply, they didn't register, so we had to deactivate them. Purely procedural.
Sounds very clinical, deactivate. But what does that registration actually mean in practice? And why shut down things like LinkedIn or Pinterest? They don't exactly seem like hotbeds for, the kind of stuff governments usually worry about.
Well, that's where you hit the nail on the head. It separates the official story from, perhaps, the underlying intent. The government said the goal was noble, right? Cracking down on hate speech, fake news, online crime. That's the public justification.
Okay.
But registration compliance often means more. It typically requires platforms to set up local offices, appoint a local contact person, maybe even store data locally or grant access to it.
So it's a control mechanism, not just content moderation.
Precisely. And the impact. It was immediate and chaotic. It wasn't just curbing crime. It hit the economy hard.
How so?
Businesses rely on these platforms. Think communication, marketing. The tourism sector, which is vital for Nepal, took a massive hit.
Right.
And just everyday people trying to talk to family, working or living abroad, suddenly cut off. Blocking LinkedIn really makes you question if hate speech was the only motive. It looks more like controlling all communication channels.
And the international community picked up on that.
Oh, definitely. The Committee to Protect Journalists, the CPJ, put out a warning almost immediately. They called it a dangerous precedent for press freedom.
Yeah, it's tough to spin it as just regulation when the impact is that broad.
Exactly.
But this technical ban, it didn't just cause inconvenience, it seemed to morph very quickly into something much bigger. The sources are calling it the Gen Z protest.
That's right. We saw tens of thousands out on the streets, mostly young people.
Some even in school uniforms, apparently. Which really tells you who was driving this anger.
It does. And while the ban was the spark, their message went way beyond just getting Facebook back online.
What were they saying?
The slogans, the placards they were shouting, "Youths against corruption." The core message was about the perception, the allegation that corruption and nepotism are just rampant among Nepal's political class.
So the ban was the flashpoint, but the fuel was this deeper discontent.
Absolutely. Which brings us to a fascinating point. Mobilization. How do you organize huge protests when the government has just shut down your main digital tools?
Good question. How did they manage it?
Well, there was a loophole. A big one. TikTok.
TikTok wasn't banned? Why not?
It seems TikTok had complied with the government's registration order, unlike Facebook, X, and the others.
So TikTok agreed to the local registration terms.
Apparently so. They likely set up the required local presence, agreed to whatever data governance rules were demanded. So legally, it stayed online.
And this compliant platform then became the main tool for organizing against the government. That's quite the irony.
It's a perfect example of an information paradox, isn't it? The government probably saw TikTok as mostly entertainment, less political maybe.
Maybe.
But it turned into the absolute key tool for mobilization. The sources are really clear on this.
What kind of content was going viral on TikTok then? What was fueling the anger?
It was incredibly effective. Videos showing the daily struggles of ordinary Nepalese, juxtaposed sharply with clips, apparently, of politicians' children.
Oh, wow.
Flaunting luxury lifestyles, expensive cars, holidays abroad, you name it. TikTok provided that immediate visual gut punch.
So it wasn't abstract corruption anymore. It was visible inequality, pushed out virally on the one major platform the government left open.
Exactly. It crystallized that narrative of elite corruption versus the people's struggle. It put a face or many faces on those deep socioeconomic grievances.
That's incredible. The government's own regulatory move basically handed the opposition a megaphone.
In effect, yes.
So this simmering anger, now fueled by TikTok, eventually boiled over. There was a specific Monday in Kathmandu where things really escalated. What happened on the ground?
Yeah, that Monday seems to be the turning point described in the sources. Protesters managed to break through police lines.
They tried to storm the parliament.
They attempted to storm the parliament building, yes, and apparently set fire to the gate. This wasn't passive anymore. It was direct confrontation.
And the police response?
Immediate.
Yeah.
And according to reports and eyewitness accounts, tragically heavy-handed. The descriptions use terms like deadly and allegedly indiscriminate force.
What does that mean in practice? What were they using?
Live ammunition. That's the most serious part. But also tear gas, batons, rubber bullets, water cannons, a full range of crowd control and lethal measures.
Live rounds against protesters. That explains the death toll.
It does. The official minimum count confirmed by police was 19 dead. Many victims reportedly had bullet wounds to the head or chest.
Horrific.
And over 200 people injured seriously enough to need hospital treatment. Most of this was in Kathmandu, but the unrest wasn't just confined there.
No.
Sources confirmed 2 people were also killed in Itahari, a city in the east. So it showed the national spread of the anger and the clashes.
And the immediate political fallout while this was happening.
Well, curfews were imposed pretty quickly in the affected areas. But significantly, the Home Minister, Ramesh Lekhak, resigned.
Resigned? Why?
Specifically cited as being in response to the police killings. That's a major admission of responsibility, or at least political consequence.
And internationally, besides the CPJ warning earlier.
Yeah. The UN Human Rights Office weighed in. They demanded an immediate, prompt, and transparent investigation into the state violence.
So the government's attempt to assert control through the ban kind of backfired spectacularly, leading to a human rights crisis and a high-level resignation.
It certainly seems that way. A massive miscalculation by all accounts.
Now, you mentioned this wasn't the first time the government tried something like this. If we look at the bigger picture, the historical context, this fits a pattern.
It does. This digital clampdown isn't really out of the blue. It's crucial to remember Nepal banned TikTok just last year. In 2023.
They did? For how long?
For 9 months. And the reasons given back then, very similar. Concerns about cybercrime, hate speech, protecting social harmony.
And how did that end?
It ended only when TikTok agreed to register with the government. It basically proved that compliance could be used like a switch comply, you're back online, don't comply, you're out.
So this recent ban on the 26 platforms was applying that same lever, just on a much bigger scale.
Exactly. Yeah. And Prime Minister Sharma, even before the protests really exploded, defended the ban quite strongly.
What did he say?
He framed it in terms of national sovereignty. He said he wouldn't tolerate the nation being undermined.
That's classic language, isn't it? Equating dissent or noncompliance with attacking the nation itself.
It is. And he got very specific. He basically dismissed the economic damage we talked about, the impact on jobs, businesses, tourism.
How?
He was quoted saying that the independence of the nation is greater than the loss of jobs of a handful of individuals. And he accused the platforms of defying Nepali law.
So, patriotism versus these foreign tech companies breaking the rules, that's the narrative. It ignores the huge internal impact.
Completely. It reframes the whole thing.
No, it's interesting. Historically, Nepal actually had a reputation for relatively more freedom of expression compared to some neighbors, right?
Generally, yes. It wasn't seen as severely restrictive in the same way as some others in the region.
But critics are saying that's changing, that there's a growing overreach under the current Ali government.
That's the definite concern being voiced. And journalists themselves are reacting very strongly.
How so?
We saw reports of dozens of journalists actually gathering to protest, not just the social media ban, but this perceived broader shift.
What were their messages?
Their slogans were pretty direct. Democracy hacked, authoritarianism back, and no silencing of voices. They see this as an attack on dissent more generally.
And is there substance to that fear beyond the social media ban? Are there other moves happening?
Yes, and this is perhaps the most worrying part for the future. The sources point to draft legislation currently being debated in Parliament.
What kind of legislation?
Bills that could bring in heavy fines, even jail time, for publishing content deemed against the national interest.
That phrase again, national interest, it's so vague.
Dangerously vague, especially when applied to journalism or public discourse. Who defines it? The government, presumably.
And what are the specific powers these bills might grant?
They're alarming. Beyond fines and jail for individuals, these proposals could allow the government to just shut down newspapers entirely.
Shut them down.
Yes, and revoke journalists' licenses if their reporting is judged to be against this national interest.
Wow. So in a country where corruption is a major public concern, defining criticism of the government or elites as being against the national interest.
Effectively silences critical voices.
Mm-hmm.
It removes those checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
So the digital ban starts to look less like an isolated incident and more like, potentially, the first big step in a wider legislative push for information control.
Okay. So let's try to synthesize this for you, the listener. What we've seen here is this really volatile mix. On one hand, you have very modern digital mobilization, ironically using a platform like TikTok that complied with government rules.
Right, and that's crashing headlong into these really deep, long-standing frustrations about corruption, about nepotism, about how the country is run.
And the whole situation is framed by a government using the language of national security, law and order, compliance to justify these quite sweeping control measures.
And it really is a powerful case study,
Mm-hmm.
not just for Nepal, but you see echoes of this globally. This tension between states trying to regulate the digital world, often saying it's for security or stopping crime, and the public seeing it as creeping authoritarianism.
And the ban, which was maybe intended to restore order or assert control.
It just gave the youth, particularly, a brand new, very visible, very potent grievance to rally around. It unified them.
It really did. Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to consider as you think more about this deep dive. If a government starts defining online dissent, especially calls for accountability, transparency about things like corruption, if that gets labeled as undermining the nation or being against the national interest.
Then what tools are left? What effective, nonviolent ways do citizens, especially young citizens, have to challenge those visible, entrenched problems like corruption and nepotism?
That's the huge challenge Nepal is facing right now. And frankly, it's a question many countries are wrestling with in this digital age. Something to keep thinking about.